Effective immediately, your position, and everyone on your team, is being replaced by something smarter. The words cut through the boardroom like a blade. Polite applause erupted around me as my CEO, Aaron Caldwell, grinned at the row of investors seated along the mahogany table. Behind him, a giant screen displayed the words in bold letters, AI integration, 100% success. I sat frozen in my chair, the termination letter still warm in my hands, watching my own creation announce my unemployment. The interface blinking on that massive screen was mine, every algorithm, every line of code, every predictive model. I had built it all from nothing. For a brief second, my name even appeared in the metadata before someone quickly switched slides. Created by Bryn Reynolds. That's how my career ended, replaced by a machine I built with my own hands. And that's also how my revenge began. The investors nodded approvingly while Aaron gestured at the screen like a magician revealing his greatest trick. Nobody looked at me. Nobody acknowledged that the woman sitting in the back corner had spent 9 years making this moment possible. I was invisible, erased, obsolete. The machine hummed and blinked, displaying real-time data with perfect accuracy. My name was Bryn Reynolds, and until that morning, I had been Luminar Tech's senior systems architect. I was 32 years old, and for nearly a decade, I gave that company everything I had. My nights disappeared into lines of code. My weekends vanished into system tests and debugging sessions. I missed birthdays, holidays, and countless dinners because Aaron always needed one more feature, one more upgrade, one more impossible deadline met yesterday. I built the predictive AI platform that became their crown jewel, technology that could analyze market trends, customer behavior, and financial patterns with stunning accuracy. But once the technology became valuable enough to attract serious investors, Aaron decided I wasn't efficient enough anymore. He didn't need the architect once the building was complete. The night before that boardroom humiliation, I'd received a cryptic email from Aaron. The subject line read, "Important announcement tomorrow." The message was brief, "Trust the rollout. This is big for the company." I didn't realize the rollout was my termination. I walked into that meeting thinking we were celebrating our success. Instead, I watched my legacy claim my job while investors applauded my replacement. After the announcement ended, my colleagues gathered in the break room to toast champagne over what they called AI success. I packed my desk in complete silence. The office buzzed with excited chatter about efficiency gains and cost savings. Nobody mentioned the 12 people losing their jobs that day. I placed my notebooks into a cardboard box, each one filled with years of problem-solving and late-night breakthroughs. My fingers traced the coffee stain on my favorite mug, the one that read, "I turn coffee into code." Tyler, a young intern I'd been mentoring, approached my desk hesitantly. His eyes kept darting toward the break room where Aaron was holding court. "You taught me everything I know about systems architecture," he whispered, his voice thick with guilt. "I'm really sorry this is happening to you." I managed a small smile despite the anger building in my chest. "Remember what I taught you about shortcuts in code," I said quietly. "They always cause problems later." He nodded slowly, understanding the double meaning behind my words. I left my ID card sitting on my keyboard, right next to the framed photo of our team. Walking out through those glass doors, I caught my reflection alongside the word innovation etched in silver letters. My parents heard the news before I even made it home. My father called while I was still sitting in my car in the parking lot, unable to turn the key. "Your mother saw it on the business news channel," he said, his voice tight with something between anger and deep disappointment. "They're calling it a breakthrough in workplace efficiency." When I finally drove home and walked through the front door, my father was waiting in the kitchen. He'd worked in a manufacturing factory for 30 years before automation took his job away too. "You spent your entire life building the thing that took your job," he said bitterly, stirring his coffee with more force than necessary. "You call that smart?" The words hit me harder than Aaron's betrayal had. My mother stood by the window with her arms crossed tight. "We bragged about our genius daughter to everyone in the neighborhood," she said without looking at me. "What do we tell them now?" I had no answer for her. I had no job, no allies, and apparently no one who understood that I'd been used and discarded. That night, I lay awake staring at my bedroom ceiling, replaying every warning I'd given Aaron about rushing the deployment. Late that night, sleep refused to come. I opened my laptop and pulled up my backup files, copies of the original code I'd written before Aaron's team started making modifications. I studied the algorithms like a doctor examining X-rays, searching for something I knew had to be there. And then I found it, hidden deep in the core processing engine. The flaw. The same critical vulnerability I'd warned Aaron about 8 months ago during a late-night meeting in his corner office. The AI couldn't handle extreme data loads beyond a certain threshold. Under normal operations, everything would run perfectly smooth. But if the system got pushed too hard, processing too many complex queries simultaneously, it would cascade into complete failure. The algorithms would start contradicting themselves, creating dangerous feedback loops that would eventually crash the entire platform. I'd begged him to let me build in additional safeguards before any public launch. "We don't have time for that," he'd said dismissively, waving his hand. "Investors want to see results now, not next quarter. We'll patch it later if we need to." Later never came. I stared at that vulnerable section of code, my cursor blinking over the problematic lines. My finger hovered over the keyboard, ready to send Aaron one final warning. Then I stopped myself. He made his choice. The next few months passed in a gray blur of rejection emails and slow rebuilding. I created a small consulting firm under a deliberately vague name, Apex Systems Solutions, and started taking contracts from small startup companies. My rule was simple: I would help companies implement automation that empowered their employees, never replaced them. Technology should make human work better, not eliminate human workers entirely. I stayed completely off social media platforms. No LinkedIn updates, no Twitter commentary, no Instagram photos. I became a ghost in the industry I'd once helped define. My old colleagues occasionally reached out with sympathetic messages that felt empty, but most stayed completely silent, probably afraid that associating with me might taint their careers. Only Tyler, the intern I'd mentored, checked in with me regularly through encrypted messages. "Things are getting weird here," he texted one evening after midnight. "The AI keeps having these minor glitches that nobody can figure out how to fix." I didn't respond to that message. I simply saved it in a folder on my desktop that I'd labeled receipts. Each week, I added more screenshots, more news articles, more evidence of the tiny cracks beginning to show in Aaron's perfect system. Luminar Tech skyrocketed over the next year like a rocket heading for the stars. Business magazines featured Aaron on their glossy covers with headlines like "The Visionary Who Revolutionized AI" and "How One CEO Cracked the Code to Perfect Automation." I read every single article from my small apartment, sitting with coffee in my hand, my expression calm but my eyes sharp. Aaron gave countless interviews where he casually mentioned our team's brilliant work without ever saying my name once. The patents were quietly refiled with Luminar Tech listed as the sole inventor. My name, which had appeared on every preliminary filing, was scrubbed completely clean from the records. Legally, I couldn't challenge it because of the non-disclosure agreement I'd signed. The NDA gave them rights to anything I created during my employment. I knew that when I signed it years ago, young and eager and naive about how business really worked. But the NDA said absolutely nothing about what I could do with my knowledge of the system's hidden flaws. I watched their stock price climb higher and higher. I watched Aaron move into an expensive penthouse downtown. I watched him hire a fancy PR team to manage his image. And I waited patiently, because I knew something he'd forgotten. 14 months after my termination, I received an encrypted message from an email address I didn't recognize. When I opened it cautiously, I found a short note from Tyler: "They're modifying your algorithms without proper authorization. Nobody here really understands what they're changing or why. Thought you should know." Attached to his message were screenshots of recent code revisions, each one marked "Approved by A. Caldwell" in red digital ink. I studied the changes very carefully, line by line. Aaron's new team had tried to optimize the processing speed by removing what they thought were redundant safety checks. They had absolutely no idea those redundancies were deliberate buffers I'd built to prevent catastrophic system overload. They'd just removed the brakes from a car they were planning to drive at maximum speed. I wanted to laugh at the irony. I wanted to scream at their stupidity. Instead, I calmly took screenshots of everything and added them to my growing folder of evidence. Technically, my NDA prevented me from speaking publicly about Luminar Tech's proprietary technology. But it said absolutely nothing about keeping detailed private records. Tyler's message ended with a warning: I think something bad is coming soon. Everyone here acts like we're invincible, but I remember what you taught me. The first public cracks appeared 18 months after my departure from Luminar Tech. A popular tech blog published an article titled "Minor Glitches in Luminar Tech's AI Platform Raise Questions Among Users." The piece described how several major clients had started reporting unusual data classifications and occasional prediction errors. Nothing catastrophic had happened yet, but it was enough to raise eyebrows among people who really understood these systems. Aaron's expensive PR team immediately released a carefully worded statement dismissing the concerns as normal optimization processes and assuring worried clients that their world-class team was constantly improving platform performance. I read that statement 3 times, noting every single half-truth and misdirection. They were plastering over the cracks with pretty words instead of fixing the crumbling foundation beneath. Making the problem invisible instead of actually solving underlying issues. I opened my laptop and checked the system specifications that Tyler had been secretly sending me. Based on their current client load and processing demands, they were running at about 60% of the threshold that would trigger the cascade failure. They had room to grow. But not very much room at all. I did some quick calculations based on their publicly announced expansion plans. If they kept adding new clients at their current pace, they'd hit critical mass in approximately 4 to 6 months. 8 months later, I attended a regional tech expo where I'd been hired to give a small workshop on ethical AI implementation. I was setting up my presentation materials when I spotted a familiar face across the crowded convention hall. Mason Hartley, one of my former senior developers, stood at their company booth looking absolutely exhausted. During the lunch break, he found me sitting at a quiet corner table in the cafe. "Bryn," he said, sitting down across from me without invitation. "I've been really hoping to run into you somewhere." He glanced over his shoulder nervously before continuing in a lower voice. "They're preparing for something massive right now. A presentation to a group of international investors. The biggest deal in company history, $200 million. Everything depends on the AI running a completely flawless real-time demonstration." My coffee suddenly tasted bitter on my tongue. "When is this happening?" I asked calmly. 3 weeks from today. Aaron's been pushing everyone to maximum capacity, running constant stress tests, processing enormous data sets to make absolutely sure everything looks perfect. 3 weeks. And they were already stress testing the system right up to its limits. The cascade failure wouldn't wait for a convenient moment. It would happen when the machine finally got pushed beyond its breaking point. I met his worried eyes directly. "Then I really hope it behaves itself." The night before the scheduled investor presentation, I was sitting at home having tea and reviewing a client proposal when my phone buzzed. A Luminar Tech engineer had posted on a private industry forum I still had access to, "Experiencing unexpected anomalies in core engine tonight. Random data loops and processing delays everywhere. Need emergency patch before tomorrow's demo." The responses came quickly, each message more panicked than the last. "Same here on my end. System keeps contradicting its own predictions. Is anyone else seeing cascade warnings in the error logs? Why is this happening now of all times?" I read through the entire thread calmly, sipping my chamomile tea and watching the panic unfold. The flaw wasn't just emerging anymore. It was spreading through the system like a crack spreading through glass. The stress tests they'd been running had pushed the AI right up to the very edge of its processing threshold. Now, with a major demonstration scheduled for tomorrow morning, the system was beginning to choke on its own data. One engineer wrote desperately, "Should we try to contact Bryn Reynolds? She built the original architecture. Someone else replied quickly. Aaron specifically said never to reach out to her. We handle this ourselves or we're all out of jobs. I smiled sadly into my tea. Pride was about to become very expensive. I woke up the next morning to 42 missed calls from an unknown number on my phone. I'd left my phone on silent overnight, and the calls had started coming in at 4 a.m, each one apparently more desperate. There were also 17 increasingly frantic text messages from Tyler waiting. Bryn, everything is crashing hard. Aaron is completely losing his mind right now. They tried every patch they know. Nothing works at all. The system is in complete failure mode. He's asking about you now. I think he's going to call you. I made myself coffee and stood by my apartment window, watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of orange. My phone rang again with that same unknown number. This time, I answered. Bryn. Aaron's voice cracked with pure panic and desperation. Everything's crashing. The whole platform is completely down. We can't recover it. The investors arrive in exactly 2 hours and we have absolutely nothing to show them. I let the heavy silence stretch between us for several long seconds. My pulse was completely steady. That sounds like a serious problem, I said finally, keeping my tone neutral. I'll pay whatever you want. Name any price. Just please fix this. The man who had replaced me with a machine was now begging for human help. I spent the next hour carefully drafting a detailed consulting contract while Aaron left increasingly frantic voicemails. My terms were very specific and completely non-negotiable, $1,000 per minute of consultation time, paid in full before I touched a single line of code. Additionally, a public acknowledgement of my authorship rights to the original system architecture, including full restoration of my name on all relevant patents. And finally, a personal letter of recommendation acknowledging my contributions to Luminar Tech's success. I emailed the contract at exactly 7:30 a.m. By 7:32, Aaron had signed it electronically and transferred the first hour's payment. $60,000 appeared in my banking app while I was calmly buttering my toast. Desperation, I realized, has absolutely no pride left. It also has zero patience for negotiation. I replied with a single line, I'll be there in 40 minutes. Have full system access ready and your entire tech team present. Then I got dressed very carefully, choosing a crisp white blouse and perfectly tailored black pants. Professional, confident, completely unshaken. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. 2 years ago, I'd left that building in tears, carrying a cardboard box. Today, I would walk back in as the only person capable of saving them. The Luminar Tech building looked exactly the same as I remembered, gleaming glass and steel with that silver innovation inscription I'd passed on my last day. But everything felt completely different now as I approached. I walked through the polished lobby carrying only my laptop bag. No cardboard box this time. No shame weighing down my steps. The receptionist's eyes went wide when she recognized me. Ms. Reynolds. Mr. Caldwell is expecting you upstairs. Conference room A. The same room where I'd been fired. I took the elevator up to the 5th floor, my heels clicking against the marble with satisfying authority. When the elevator doors opened, I saw Aaron pacing frantically outside the conference room, his expensive suit rumpled, his usually perfect hair uncombed. He looked like he'd aged 5 years overnight. Bryn, thank God you're here. He reached toward my arm but stopped when I stepped back. Inside, I said simply, gesturing toward the conference room door. The room was absolute chaos when I entered. 12 engineers hunched over laptops, their tired faces illuminated by screens full of red error messages. System diagrams covered every wall, each marked with red circles and desperate notes. Everyone froze when I walked in. Tyler looked up from his laptop, relief flooding his face. Aaron's new head of technology, a man named Pierce, stood up defensively. With all respect, what can she do that we haven't tried? Within 30 minutes of sitting down, I'd diagnosed the exact problem causing the system failure. The engineers had tried everything they could think of, rebooting servers multiple times, rolling back updates, clearing caches, restarting services frantically. But they were only treating symptoms, not the actual disease. The cascade failure had begun deep in the core processing engine, exactly where I'd warned Aaron it would. The AI was caught in feedback loops, each prediction contradicting the last one, each query generating errors that triggered more queries. The system was essentially drowning in its own logic. "You removed the safety buffers I built in," I said calmly, pointing at specific lines. "These sections here." They looked like redundant code, so someone deleted them to improve processing speed. But they were circuit breakers designed to prevent exactly this kind of cascade failure. Pierce's face went bright red with embarrassment. "That optimization was approved by people who didn't understand the architecture," I finished his sentence. "Because the person who designed it was replaced by something supposedly smarter." Aaron stood behind me, watching over my shoulder as I typed steadily. "Can you actually fix it?" I didn't answer him immediately. My fingers moved across the keyboard, rebuilding the safety systems they'd carelessly stripped away. Every keystroke felt like justice. After 25 minutes of focused work, I initiated a controlled restart sequence for the entire system. "This will take approximately 8 minutes, I said calmly, standing up. "The system will stabilize completely, but you'll need continuous human oversight going forward to prevent this from happening again." The room held its collective breath as progress bars slowly filled across multiple screens. Error messages stopped cascading down like red waterfalls. System indicators shifted from red to yellow to green. At minute 6, the AI's main interface flickered back to life. At minute 7, it began processing test queries correctly. At minute 8, full functionality was restored. Someone started clapping, then others joined nervously. Pierce looked simultaneously relieved and humiliated. Tyler was grinning openly. Aaron exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. "We're stable," one of the engineers confirmed, checking the back-end systems. "All core functions operating normally now. Prediction accuracy back to baseline." I closed my laptop with a satisfying click. "You're stable for now. But this will definitely happen again if you keep pushing the system beyond its design parameters without proper safeguards. You need human oversight, people who understand not just what the code does, but why it was written that way." My words hung in the air like an indictment. Everyone in that room knew I was talking about more than just code architecture. I was halfway to the elevator, ready to leave, when Aaron caught up to me quickly, leaving the conference room full of stunned engineers behind. "Bryn, wait. Please." I turned slowly to face him. He looked desperate, diminished. Nothing like the confident CEO who had smiled while announcing my replacement. "Come back full-time," he said quickly, words tumbling out. "Name your position. Name your salary." "Chief Technology Officer. Senior Vice President. Whatever title you want." I studied his face carefully, searching for genuine remorse beneath the panic. I found mostly fear of losing his deal, his company, his reputation. "You need someone," I corrected him calmly. "You need expertise you can't find on demand or replicate with algorithms. But you don't need me specifically. You just need what I know." "That's not true at all." "You're the best, I was always the best," I interrupted firmly. "That didn't stop you from replacing me with my own creation and erasing my name from my work. You didn't value me when I was here every day. You only value me now because your machine failed and your deal is in jeopardy." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. We both knew I was right. "I already have a position," I continued. "I have my own company where I work with people who respect human contribution. Where I teach others to build systems that empower workers instead of replacing them." Outside the building, I found Tyler waiting nervously by my car. He'd apparently run down 5 flights of stairs to catch me before I left. "That was incredible," he said, slightly breathless. "You saved the whole company and then just walked away from everything Aaron offered." I unlocked my car but didn't get in yet. I didn't save the company, Tyler. I fixed a technical problem. There's a big difference. Still. After how they treated you badly, why even help at all? You could have just let them crash and burn. It was a fair question. I'd asked myself the same thing during the drive over. Because I built that system, I explained. It represented years of my work, my ideas, my problem solving. Letting it fail wouldn't have hurt Aaron. It would have hurt the technology itself, and all the smaller companies that license components of it. People who had nothing to do with my firing would have suffered. I paused, then added, revenge isn't about destroying what you created. It's about making sure people understand who created it. About making sure they can't erase you from the story just because it's convenient. Tyler nodded slowly, understanding. For what it's worth, I'm leaving Luminar Tech soon. I got a job offer from a company that actually values its people. Your recommendation letter was why they hired me. I smiled genuinely for the first time that morning. Good. Remember what really matters in this industry. The next morning, my inbox contained the documentation I'd required in my contract. Aaron had kept his word, probably because the alternative was breach of contract and more legal problems. The patent filings had been amended to list me as the original architect. My name appeared prominently in the system documentation. And there was a carefully worded letter of recommendation that managed to praise my contributions without explicitly admitting wrongdoing. It was the corporate equivalent of a forced apology, but it was enough. More importantly, by noon I received a call from Victoria Bowman, the lead investor who had been present for that morning's presentation. Ms. Reynolds, I'm calling to discuss a potential consulting arrangement. Our firm is very interested in your approach to AI development, particularly your emphasis on human oversight and ethical implementation. I listened carefully as she outlined an opportunity to advise multiple companies in their portfolio on technology integration. The compensation she mentioned was substantially more than my entire annual salary at Luminar Tech. I should mention, she continued, we were quite impressed with how you handled this morning's crisis. And we were equally impressed by your decision to walk away afterward. That showed remarkable integrity. After we finished discussing terms, I hung up and stared at my phone. Aaron had called me back to save his deal. Instead, I'd impressed his investors so much they wanted to work with me directly. I reluctantly opened Twitter after Tyler texted me and found my name attached to thousands of posts. Someone from inside Luminar Tech had apparently shared the story of my dramatic return and equally dramatic exit. The narrative had struck a nerve with tech workers everywhere who felt undervalued and replaceable. Bryn Reynolds got fired, saved the company that fired her, then refused to stay. Absolute legend. CEO replaces his chief architect with her own AI. AI fails. She fixes it and walks away. This is my new life goal. Companies need to learn, you can't just erase the people who built your foundation and expect the building to stand. The attention was overwhelming but also validating in a way I hadn't expected. My story had become larger than just my personal experience. It represented something people desperately needed to hear, that human expertise, human judgment, and human dignity couldn't be automated away without consequences. By evening, 3 major tech publications had requested interviews with me. A woman named Hannah Foster from Tech Voice called me directly. Your story resonates because it's happening everywhere. People are being told they're obsolete, that machines can do their jobs better. Then the machines fail and suddenly everyone remembers why humans mattered. She paused. Would you be willing to talk publicly about your experience? Not as revenge against Luminar Tech, but as a cautionary tale about the relationship between technology and the people who create it? I thought about it carefully. Yes. But this isn't about being anti-AI. Over the next 3 months, my new consulting company grew exponentially beyond my expectations. Victoria's investment firm connected me with a dozen companies looking to implement AI systems without repeating Luminar Tech's mistakes. My approach was straightforward. Technology should augment human capability, not replace human workers. Automation should handle repetitive tasks so people could focus on creative problem-solving and complex decision-making. The industry began calling it human-centered AI or empowerment automation. Whatever the label, the philosophy was simple: keep people in the loop, value their expertise, and design systems that made work better rather than obsolete. I hired former colleagues who had been let go by various companies during their automation pushes. Our team grew to 15 people, all of whom understood firsthand why protecting human value in technology mattered. Tyler joined us as a senior developer. We worked from a modest office downtown, nothing like Luminar Tech's gleaming headquarters, but the atmosphere was completely different. People weren't afraid. They weren't competing to prove their worthiness. They were collaborating, teaching each other, building something sustainable. Meanwhile, Luminar Tech's troubles continued getting worse. A business journalist reached out for comment on rumors of internal chaos. Sources say the company is struggling to maintain the AI platform without key personnel. Can you confirm? I declined to comment specifically, but the journalist published anyway. It detailed how several major clients had switched to competitors after experiencing ongoing technical issues. 6 months after the crisis, a whistleblower from inside Luminar Tech leaked thousands of internal documents to the press. The files revealed that Aaron had known about the system's vulnerabilities before my termination. Emails showed him dismissing my warnings as overcautious and resistant to innovation. There were spreadsheets calculating how much money they'd save by replacing my entire department with AI, with no consideration for institutional knowledge. Most damning were the patent documents showing the deliberate removal of my name and the internal memo instructing legal staff to minimize my documented contributions. The fallout was immediate and severe. Tech publications ran headlines like Luminar Tech CEO ignored safety warnings to cut costs and documents reveal systematic erasure of key architects' contributions. 3 board members resigned in disgrace. Major clients publicly announced they were reviewing their contracts. The stock price plummeted 40% in 2 days. Within a week, Aaron announced he was stepping down as CEO to focus on personal health and spend time with family. The corporate phrase forced out in disgrace. Pierce, the head of technology who had questioned my value, was also out. Half the executive team was replaced in what the company called organizational restructuring. I watched it all unfold from my office, feeling neither satisfaction nor sadness. Just a quiet sense of completion. The truth had emerged without me forcing it. Sometimes justice doesn't require revenge. Sometimes it just requires patience and documentation. 1 year after leaving Luminar Tech, I was invited to deliver the keynote address at the National Technology Conference. The same conference where Aaron had once spoken about his revolutionary AI platform. I stood backstage, listening to the introduction. Our keynote speaker needs no introduction to anyone following recent industry developments. Bryn Reynolds is the architect behind the technology that changed how we think about predictive AI. She's also become a leading voice for ethical automation and human-centered technology. The applause was substantial as I walked onto the stage. Hundreds of faces looked up at me, engineers, executives, students, journalists. I could see Tyler sitting in the 3rd row, beaming with pride. "Thank you," I began, waiting for the applause to settle. "I'm going to tell you a story about a machine that replaced its creator. About a company that learned an expensive lesson. But mostly, I'm going to talk about why the future of technology depends on remembering its human element." For 40 minutes, I shared my experience, not with bitterness, but with clarity. I talked about the importance of respecting expertise, the danger of prioritizing efficiency over safety, and the necessity of keeping human judgment in technological systems. Technology should never replace integrity, I concluded. It should never erase the people who make it possible. Because machines can process data, but humans create meaning. Machines can optimize systems, but humans understand context. We built these tools. We shouldn't become obsolete in the world they create. The audience stood. 2 years after my termination, I walked along the same street where I'd once left Luminar Tech carrying a cardboard box and my shattered dignity. The building looked different now. Some glass panels had been replaced, the silver innovation inscription updated to include with integrity beneath it. New management was trying to rebuild the company's reputation. My phone buzzed constantly with new contract offers, speaking invitations, and media requests. I'd become something I never set out to be, a symbol of resistance against dehumanizing automation. My company now employed 35 people and had partnered with major firms to develop ethical AI guidelines. We'd published papers, created certification programs, and influenced policy discussions. The work was meaningful in ways my time at Luminar Tech never had been. I passed a newsstand displaying business magazines. One cover featured Aaron's face with the headline, "Where are they now? Tech CEOs who fell from grace." I didn't buy it. His story wasn't mine to follow anymore. Instead, I stopped at a small cafe, ordered coffee, and opened my laptop. A new client wanted help building an AI system for healthcare diagnostics. The project was complex, important, and needed someone who understood both technical excellence and human impact. My kind of challenge. As I reviewed the specifications, I smiled. Some crashes are necessary. They remind us who built the systems. They force us to reconsider what we automated away. They teach us that humans aren't obsolete, we're irreplaceable. 5 years after everything began, I stood in my corner office overlooking the city. Reynolds Tech Solutions occupied 3 floors now, with offices in 4 cities and a reputation for combining innovation with integrity. The company had become exactly what I'd envisioned during those dark months after my termination, a place where technology empowered people instead of replacing them. My phone showed a news alert: Luminar Tech acquired by larger firm after years of struggling stock performance. The company Aaron had built on my algorithms had been absorbed by a competitor who would strip it for parts. In the end, the machine hadn't been enough. Without the humans who understood it, maintained it, and improved it, the technology had stagnated. My original algorithms were still valuable, but the company that had tried to profit without respecting their creator had failed. I thought about that moment in the boardroom when Aaron had announced my replacement. How small I'd felt, how erased, how disposable. I thought about the woman I'd been then, brilliant but undervalued, essential but unrecognized. She would be proud of what I'd built from those ashes. Not revenge exactly, but something better. Validation. Legacy. Proof that human expertise, creativity, and dignity couldn't be automated away. My assistant knocked on the door. "The team is ready for the strategy meeting." I closed my laptop and stood. Time to build the future, the right way, with people at its center. Because the most sophisticated machine in any system is still the human mind that created it.